Great. So our last speaker for today is Isabelle Winnick. Izzy's joined us from Pomona College, and she's been working this summer with Jhon. Today she'll tell us about their project together, exploring life beyond the habitable zone, thorium, and solar twins.
Thank you, Gwen, and thank you all for sticking around for the final group of presentations. I loved everyone's presentations today, and I'm super excited to talk to you about my project this summer. So like Gwen said, I've been exploring parameters for life in exoplanets that are orbiting their host stars beyond the habitable zone. So the host stars in particular that we're looking at are solar twins. These are stars that are very similar to our sun. And what we're interested in is measuring the thorium abundances in these exoplanets as a potential tracer for life. So to start, before we get into our exoplanets, I want to talk about our terrestrial traditional model for habitability, which is our Earth. So on Earth, thorium is really influential on many of the factors that set the constraints that have constructed the kind of environment that we needed for life as we know it. So some of these include stable surface temperatures within a given range. So we have a liquid solvent on the surface of our planet, in our case, a liquid water ocean. We also have a lot of key geodynamic processes that thorium is involved with, and these are really important for atmospheric recycling so that our air is breathable. Okay, so this project is getting into a case for life outside of the habitable zone. So right now, the habitable zone is defined as the region around a star where solar radiation can provide sufficient energy for a liquid water ocean to exist on the surface of the planet. But we're interested in expanding this definition to a new radiogenic zone. So in this case, we're looking at a different source of energy. This is radiogenic heating inside the planets. So in the case of Earth, this occurs in the silicate mantle and crust, where the radioactive decay of thorium-232 provides energy for convection and plate tectonics and volcanism, which have all come together to form our Earth as we know it. So we're interested in measuring the thorium of these planets, but the way that we're going to actually go about this is by measuring the thorium in their stellar hosts' atmospheres. And we're able to do this because these stars and their planets are formed from the same protostellar material, and thorium isn't being produced in stellar evolution. So we're inferring that these stars and their planets have the same thorium abundances. Now, our study seeks to answer two major questions. Our first is, how does thorium vary in solar twins with and without exoplanets? We want to know if our sun is unique in the universe or if there's many stars like ours. And we want to know if thorium is playing a role as an energy source in other planets. And so if we do find that thorium is important in other planets, we want to know more about its evolutionary history. So that leads me to our second question, more related to galactic chemical evolution, which is, what is the evolutionary history of our process elements in the galactic thin disk as demonstrated by thorium, which is one of these our process elements? So getting into my first question, how will our project explore our potential case for life? Well, first, we're going to measure thorium in 200 planet-hosting stars using HARPS data from La Silla Observatory and MICE data from Las Campanas. And these are both really high resolution, high SNR spectrographs, so they're going to give us really high quality data to work with. Next, we want to compare these measurements with thorium abundances in our sun and also of solar twins that do not have confirmed planets. In particular, we're looking at a study conducted by Vitello et al. In 2019, which looked at about 60 solar twins that did not have confirmed planets, and so that's something we're going to want to compare to. And finally, we want to calculate the planetary energy budgets of the planets in our sample based on their thorium abundances. Now, this last bit is a little bit more complicated, and it's going to require some simulation work, so it's outside the scope of this current project, but that will be a next step. So the first step in our process is to select our sample of solar-type stars. So we start with all the stars in the Gaia database and down select based on color constraints from known solar twins. So here we have 17,000 solar-type stars that my mentor looked at in the study in 2021. And these include both solar twins, which are stars that are very similar to our sun in terms of effective temperature, metallicity, and surface gravity, and also stars that are more broadly similar to our sun, solar-type stars with a wider range of each of these parameters. And we're interested in in including both of these because we want to have a large sample from which to start to think about our thorium correlations. So once we have all of these solar candidates, we want to cross-match them with the NASA Exoplanet Archive to see which ones might have exoplanets. So when doing so, we see that there are 200 solar twins and solar type stars that are hosting exoplanets that we want to look at in our study. So our next step is to measure the thorium in these stars. So we do this with spectral synthesis or spectral fitting. And so if we look at the left here, we see that there are multiple transitions from various elements around our thorium line of interest in black. And if we look at the right, we see that our thorium absorption feature is actually very small. So it's important that we disentangle this carefully. And the way that we do that is by varying the elemental abundances around thorium manually until our best fit in red matches our observed data in blue on the right here. And so we start by doing that by eye. And then we go in with our code called Calcaya that implements chi-squared minimization and a Bayesian algorithm to determine the best fit and uncertainties for our thorium abundance. We do this with 1,000 different solutions of thorium within plus or minus 0.3 dex of the initial solution that we set by eye. And so once we have these thorium measurements for all of our stars, we can start to think about how thorium relates to different stellar parameters and also to different planetary parameters. So like I mentioned before, in 2019, Botello et al. Conducted a study of 60 solar twins without confirmed exoplanets. They found that when they plotted thorium versus isochrone age, that thorium was anti-correlated with age. So younger stars tended to have more thorium. And they also found that the sun was slightly deficient in thorium compared to stars of its age. So we really wanted to look into this more. So we began by reanalyzing all of Botello's data and then adding that to our sample of stars with confirmed exoplanets. And what we found was a very similar relationship. Now, I don't know, you might not have seen in the last slide, but our slope on this graph is about minus 0.035. And here it's minus 0.034. And it's interesting to consider that that last graph was looking specifically at fitting the stars without confirmed exoplanets, whereas this graph is fitting to the stars with confirmed exoplanets. And so we're seeing here that both are following a similar correlation, a very similar correlation. And so that means that we're on the right track and that thorium in solar twins with confirmed planets is going to act similarly to the ones without. We also find that young stars have more thorium than older stars. And interestingly, we see that the sun does appear slightly deficient in thorium when we compare it to the stars around it. And so this is a really interesting result because it tells us that the stars that are around the sun's age and younger will have more thorium, and so their planets will have larger energy budgets to work with. So now we want to look at how thorium relates to some planetary parameters. So here I have plotted the mass of the solar system for each of these stars, excluding the star itself, so that we can classify into different types of planetary systems. And I have a color map here that shows the distance from these planets to their host star. And so we find that many of the stars with supersolar thorium abundances are hosting exoplanets beyond the traditional habitable zone. So we do have many candidates to consider when calculating these energy budgets. In particular, right here, we find a good super Earth candidate for habitability, where it has a distance that is further from its host star than our own, but it also has a higher thorium abundance. And so that's one of the exoplanets that we're going to start looking at soon. And then we also see that many of the stars with exoplanets that are in the habitable zone are also good candidates. And in particular, if we look at, there's this little orange star that's overlapping with our sun symbol here. And that is one of our best known candidates for hosting kind of an Earth 2.0. So it's really interesting that it has this very similar thorium abundance. We know that this solar system, this star, is one of the most extremely similar to our sun in terms of chemistry. It is known to host a Jupiter twin, and so we suspect that there could possibly be a kind of Earth 2.0 in this solar system. And if it does, and it has a similar thorium to our sun, then this planet could have the right conditions to host life. So next, now we know that thorium can be important as an energy source in these other worlds. We want to think a little bit about its production and its evolution in the galactic disk. So here we've plotted thorium versus iron, and we see that thorium is correlated with metallicity, and this relationship is demonstrating that both elemental abundances are increasing over time. So in particular, we know that iron is being mostly produced in type 1a supernova, and thorium is being produced via nucleosynthesis in really high energy events. These events are not super well known yet, but we believe they could be neutron star mergers or neutron star black hole mergers. So really what this graph is showing is that both of these kinds of production events are increasing over time. So thorium and iron, which are both really important for the Earth, are increasing within the ISM. And so younger stars are going to have more of them. And finally, I have here a plot of thorium relative to iron versus iron. This is more of a look into galactic chemical evolution since we have our data of thorium already. And here we see that this ratio is decreasing because there is heightened iron production today. So because we know that iron is increasing over time, we can think of this x-axis here as kind of like a time with this being in the past and that being more towards the present. So we see that thorium production events dominated over iron production events in the past, whereas today iron production events dominate. And so this is more of an interesting corollary as we go down that rabbit hole of chemical evolution. So our next steps are to analyze over 100 more planet-hosting solar twins in our sample. We got through about 70 of them. We then want to use simulations of exoplanet interiors to calculate the planetary energy budgets of our really good candidates from that plot before. And finally, we want to explore the origin of the rapid neutron capture process using thorium abundances that we've measured. So finally, for my takeaways, our initial results are supporting that stellar thorium abundances are increasing with time because different mechanisms are enriching our protostellar clouds. We see that young solar twins in the galactic thin disk and solar twins that are around the sun's age are demonstrating super solar thorium abundances. So this bodes really well for their planet's internal energy budgets. And finally, our study shows that we need to reevaluate how we search for habitable worlds and expand beyond our traditional definition of the habitable zone. So that's all, and I'll take any questions.
Great, very nice. Questions for Izzy?
Oh.
We'll start with Johanna.
Thank you. Very nice presentation. I have other questions too, so I'm gonna find it afterwards. But my first question is, are you able to also measure potassium from these spectra? Because I think that's another source of radioactivity.
That is a really good point. Yeah, so potassium, uranium, and thorium are the main radioactive isotopes that are involved in heating within the Earth. And potassium and uranium have been studied extensively, but thorium has not been studied really in this context before. And so I think one thing that we want to look at doing soon is if we combine those kinds of different abundances to add up kind of what their contributions are to the energy budgets of these planets.
Other questions? Anna?
Yeah, I was wondering about the prospects of discovering Earth 2.0.
Yes. Okay. Okay, yeah. So this solar system needs to be studied further, certainly, but this star has very similar chemistry to our sun. And so I believe, Jhon, you were talking about the other day about wanting to study this this system, but that you haven't yet.
Yeah. Actually, this system is really similar to our sun because this is the first Jupiter twin detected in this system. And the chemical composition of this star is really similar to the sun, even for thorium.
So that would be really interesting to be able to observe that.
Yeah.
Right enough that it does, or is it at all like would we see the Earth if there was an Earth-sized planet that's 1 AU, or is it far away? for instance, of, you know, how likely it is that if, or like plans like are there that we actually can find it.
Yeah, actually, sorry.
You're good, yeah, go ahead.
Most of the problem is that we don't have enough data.
There's proposals to be written.
Yeah.
Great, you make a great case for this.
Thank you.
All right, I think we're out of time, so let's thank Izzy again.
Thank you.